You are listening to And If Love Remains, a unique show spotlighting people, ideas, science, culture, and art. Your host, Mike Lovett.
Thank you, Rachel. You are listening to Mike Levitt. That is me, and I have again a good friend of the program, one of my favorite people. I almost said John Trent Wolverton. Joey, my man. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thank you, Mike. It's funny. You say I'm one of your favorite people. You really are one of my favorite people, and I was telling someone just yesterday because we were planning to do this, and I'm like, if you want to hear me at like an 11, then the only place I've ever been on an 11 is with you. Everywhere else, the host seems to want to take a more tempered tone, but you seem to let the line, to let the beast off the leash, and I like it.
Well, I appreciate it. I think the stuff that you're saying, I think the gospel of liberty has got to be preached, and I think we're entering times where it's getting harder and harder to be temperate about liberty.
Well, it's like Cicero said, that one of the reasons the founding fathers loved Cicero, and I love Cicero because here we are again, standing here facing, do we allow, some distant central government to consolidate all power and to deprive us of all liberty? And Cicero himself faced that, and the founding fathers faced that. And Cicero, he said, we've come to the time where every man has to wear on his brow what he feels about this republic. And if you're either going to be branded loyal or a traitor. There's no in between.
Yeah. That's absolutely, I think that's true about our time right now. I want to ask you a question about just like your own feelings about the zeitgeist in the world, what's going on. And it's funny, we use these terms like red pilled, blue pilled, all this stuff. But I like the idea of black pilled or white pilled. Like what's your state of hopefulness as it comes to the United States or the Constitution, the things that when we think of the United States and the liberties that it's supposed to uphold, what is your hopeful factor on the near future of that?
Well, I will tell you, and maybe it's a story that'll bring a tear to your eye, and it ought to, but it's an absolute true story, and it is a story that I repeat everywhere I go. I just gave a speech in where did I give that? I don't even remember, but I gave a speech and I mentioned this story, and it happens to involve you. And it was because people always ask the same question, what is the source of hope? If you have any hope, what is the source of it? And, the story I tell is that, well, first of all, it's like the French philosopher Charles Pinot Duclos said, these same scenes are played over and over again on the stage of civilization. We see the same actors, the same plots, just different settings, but the same actors, the same plots over and over again. And the idea being that we could avoid them if we recognize that the same effects always come from the same causes. But there, as Trent Gordon said, there's a vast fund of stupidity in mankind, so we don't see those things. But one of the things, and the only thing, literally the only hope there is, in my opinion, is the rising generation and the generation after that. And so a story I tell is that, your daughter, Rachel, who you just mentioned, your daughter, how, you, first of all, every class she's ever been in of mine, she's the most fiery, patriotic little anarchist that I've ever known. And I love every second of it, and I'm here for all of it because she is so intellectually curious and so um, steadfast in her commitment to truth, and as are all your children. But Rachel is the story that I tell because you told me that she had taken quotations from class and she would like put them on your door of your house or something.
That's right.
And
She did.
yeah, and I'm like, this
Not, by the
girl.
way, not just our door. She would put them on our the I can't even talk about it. So, but she would put it on the carport door. She'd put it on right in front for everybody to see who drove by our house or drove in our driveway.
Right.
It was not hidden.
And exactly, and that's the story I tell. So the story I tell is unfortunately for the tyrant, we've got math on our side because you've got young women like Rachel and several of the young women that I've taught who will raise, you know, outside of the view of the tyrants, as Sydney calls them, hid and unregarded. Rachel and several other of her sisters will raise households full of little patriots who are hidden, unregarded. And when the time comes, they will rise up and they will draw that line and they will say, to the tyrants, you go no farther. I don't care what my father's allowed. I don't care what my grandfather's allowed. I'm not allowing it. And
Yeah.
that's what happened. I mean, James Madison Sr. didn't resist the British. It was James Madison Jr. And so your daughter and your children and several other families that I've taught, that's what it beyond hope. It's certainty, Mike. It is certainty. It's not even hope. And people think that's so foolish. And I'm like, well, you don't know these kids.
No, and you're exactly right. In fact, I took her. I was privileged to accompany. She decided to come with Dad, which is always a thrill. To one of my parties. One of my friends had a Halloween party that we went to, and she wanted to dress up in her costume, so we went. And and it's it's quite remarkable because my daughter, who's 15, doesn't look at a 40-year-old or a 60-year-old or anybody as anything different than her. Like
Right. That's true.
that she speaks to them as an adult because she's always spoken to adults, and she's and anyway, so we got in a conversation with a friend, and she brought up just out of nowhere, like, so I'm curious, what do you think about, I've been seeing stuff about the idea of Arizona seceding from the Union. What's your thoughts on that? and and honestly, I was kind of taken back because this person was like, it blew her brains away. Like, she was visibly shaken. She said, "We can't even
Wow.
talk. We can't even talk. What are you talking about? We can't talk about secession. That what I come from a military family. We can't talk about that. We can't talk about the, and what would China do? What would all of these things? And by the way, like I get it. If you've been raised for not just your generation, but for generation after generation after generation, that World War II, that American imperialism was in fact not imperialistic. That
Right.
you've been raised.
It's not an empire when we do it.
Right. That there's nothing that the the federal government can't do. Red, white, and blue. These colors don't blur. When you've been raised that way, it is really difficult to get your mind around the idea of, wait a sec, like, maybe those people on the other side of the ocean aren't my enemy after all.
Mhm.
Maybe we need to think about this a little bit differently.
Exactly. I mean, and it's one of those things whenever I encounter people that are like one nation, indivisible, I'm
Right.
like, I even wrote about that today. I'm like, you realize not a single, because one of my former students, speaking of former students, she wanted to interview me, just ask me some questions over the phone. And one of them was, you have a lot of this is what she said, you have a lot of controversial opinions. And she's like, well, which I don't agree with, but I see what she's saying. And she's like,
Right.
what do you say were, your top 3 controversial opinions? And one of them was that not a single one of the founding fathers would ever recite the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mm-hmm.
Not a single one of the founding fathers would accept a government police force. None of them
Right.
would. Not a single one of them accept it, and none of them would ever allow to have happened what has happened to us with regard to taxation. But the part about secession is like, it's so, when you read what the founders wrote, when you read what the founders read, it becomes so clear. But then people are like, I wrote an article today, Mike, as a matter of fact, for the New American. I'm winding down the teaching and ramping back up the writing. And I wrote an article. It's already been published. I wrote it and they instantly published it, about some New Jersey lawmakers
Yes.
who are, did you see that article?
I saw that article. I wanted to bring
Yeah.
that up, so I'm glad you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I quoted in there Cesare Beccaria, and it's like, and I say in the article, I know that you're going to be skeptical when I say that this is one of the 9 most often quoted men by the founding generation. I know you'll be skeptical, but you're skeptical for a very logical, predictable reason, is because for 5 or 6 generations, depending on how you counted, the great majority of Americans have been educated, giant quotes around educated, at government, at schools where the curricula is mandated by the federal government. Well, the federal government's never going to teach you what you need to know to dismantle the despots. They're never going to do that. And so it shouldn't be a surprise. You shouldn't roll your eyes and say, oh, this guy says that Cesare Beccaria was often quoted. I've never heard of him. Well, yeah, but that's on purpose,
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
it's the same it's the same reason that you were the one, after how many 40-ish years, we'll say ish generously,
Yeah, ish,
after
exactly.
40-ish years of living on this planet, you were the one that introduced me to Cato's letters. Like, I'd never even heard of them, and
Well,
they're probably the most fundamental ideas that the founders used, for both seceding from Great Britain, as well as forming the government the governments that they did.
yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, Mike, and this is what I tell people, because some people are sort of, I wouldn't say naturally, but and speaking of Trenchard and Gordon, there's Thomas Gordon translated the works of the Roman historian Sallust, and in an essay that he appended to that translation of Sallust, he explains that yes, people are naturally defensive of their education, and then when you present to them an idea that is completely new and novel and foreign to them, there's going to be this sort of natural pushback. But if you continue on and you can demonstrate to them how reliable the information that you're trying to transmit to them is, a good person, a sincere person, will see that and will learn. And then you've got another, you've expanded the broadcast area of the truth. And so that's the problem, is a lot of these people, like the lady you're talking about that was left aghast at Rachel's question. It's not that she's bad, she's ignorant. And that goes to another one of the guys. I would encourage anybody who's listening to read The Whole Duty of Man According to the Law of Nature by Samuel Pufendorf, another top 10 most often quoted man by the founding generation. Pufendorf has, in his book, The Whole Duty of Man According to the Law of Nature, Pufendorf has a whole section on ignorance and defines voluntary and involuntary ignorance. And man, reading that, and I don't remember when I read it 20 something years ago, it changed my life, because I'm like, oof, I have too many sacred cows in the old corral here of Joey's mind, And I had to be, and reading Pufendorf and just saying, oof, I've got to be intellectually honest enough and, intellectually courageous enough to slaughter the sacred cows, or else I would be voluntarily ignorant, which is unforgivable of a sentient being, particularly those of us who believe ourselves to be the children of the divine. To walk around this earth voluntarily ignorant is a sin if you're a Christian. Um, a sin if you're a Jew or a Muslim, for that matter, or a
Right.
Buddhist. And there's there's that. I don't know if you know very well, and well, I know you do. I shouldn't say it like that. I don't know if your listeners know very well of the Chronicles of Narnia, but in the last book, the last battle, where the dwarves are sitting there and they refuse to recognize the feast that Aslan has provided, and Peter and Susan and who was the other one? One of the other boys is like, Aslan, can't you, prove to them that this is not because the dwarves are sitting there. This is garbage. They're making
Yeah.
us eat garbage. This is terrible. It's so dark. And Peter's like, Aslan, can't you just pull their, hands away from their eyes and show them that they're eating a feast? He's like, no, I can't do that. They wouldn't even believe it if I did. I have all this. And so there's so many people, Mike, that walk around this earth like those dwarves in the last battle. They refuse to recognize that today we have the access to everything that our founders read, and it's a great blessing. And going right back, taking it full circle to the question about the hope, is like the certainty I have is I've seen the power of these writings, of these men who influenced our founding generation. And I've seen how those same writings influence the generation, what they would call generation. I don't know what they call after Z. I don't know what the one after Z is. Who
I
knows?
don't either, but yeah.
Z prime. I don't know. But I've seen the effect that these writings have on these people. And I don't even have a doubt. I mean, I know that I'll be in the grave before it happens, but who cares? I mean, I know for a fact that we will welcome the return of the Savior to a free America. There's no question in my mind about that, but there's also no question in my mind there's going to be a lot of hard work.
I really appreciate you saying that. I think I just yesterday did a short podcast on the idea of the true, the good, and the beautiful.
Wow.
And the I was inspired by a talk that Jeff Dice gave at the Mises Institute 40th anniversary gala or whatever it was, a little while back. But I mean, and he talked about bringing beauty back into economics, it really sparked something that I've had kind of I've been kind of, I don't know, molding in my soul and in my brain for a while now. And that's the idea of, what is true, what is art, what is beautiful, what is good. And what are like, how do you know when it is? And one thing, and it goes back to what you said about how things that these ideas of liberty translated, they inspired the founding fathers, but they're also inspire us today. One of the things I talked about is that these things are fractal in nature. In other words, a fractal is it's a design that is the same and works all the way from the bottom to the top, and you can't really get to the bottom of it, but it's the same thing. And truth is like that, like if you say something that is true, or let me put it a different way, it's bad to tell a lie, whether you're, a 6-year-old child or the president of the United States. Like that's a something that is true all the way up and all the way down. And the fact that these ideas of liberty work in that same way are kind of fractal in nature. That they I don't know, spin around and they morph, but it's always the same things that inspire people to say, wait a sec, we have to look at this in a different way. And that's a long ramble.
No,
I
no,
know, but
you're right. No, but you're right. And it's like, it's one of these things that one of these video series that I do off and on now is like, what did Trenchard and Gordon write 300 years ago today
yeah,
that is completely applicable to our own time? And because they published many of their letters in 1722, and so you can look and you can just go and see the date and pick the date. And Mike, it never fails. Do you know that they wrote about something called the South Sea Company that is nothing more than the early 18th century version of the Federal Reserve? So you read it and you're just like, oh my gosh,
wow,
how did we, but when you look at all these people that the founders read, from the ancients to the moderns, you see this 2,000-year consistent message of the value, the supernal value of liberty, and how it is that one must go about protecting it. Because if you do not protect your liberty, you will have no property or no life to protect.
yeah,
And so that it's urgent that we have people. And I don't know what it's going to take, man. Every day this place gets more perverse, it gets more tyrannical, it gets more illogical. I don't know what it's going to take to set off the powder keg, but you know, I can't wait to see when we get that generation that says, yeah, we're going to go ahead and undo all this,
right. We're gonna rebel in a completely different way. We're going to actually, we're
because
are we? Go
I'm
ahead.
telling you, man, no, read that section and I'll send it to you, the section exactly in Sydney where he talks about the hidden unregarded, man. I'm telling you,
Yeah,
these kids are being kept, and but he's talking about, he's not talking about the future. Well, he is talking about the future, but he's judging the future by the past, and he's saying, how are the Tarquins, how are the kings run out of Rome? By these kids that were taught at home out of the eye of the tyrant. And when they got to a certain age, they gave great testimony of their love of liberty. And he's
yeah.
like, we're still talking about it. And mind you, Sydney's writing this in the late 1600s, and here we are still talking about these people.
And that's the great shame of it. One of the great shames of America is that we have passed on the education of our children onto, government propaganda, and
Oh
and
man.
so and so those lights are so quickly dimmed out, and so many people that I think, we'd have a lot broader army if there were more people taught at home, frankly.
Well,
Or at
Mike.
least at least took their educations, of their children as seriously as they took their, their bank account.
Well, or the how many likes they get on their posts on Instagram. It's like, this
Yowzers.
is my thing, Mike, and I'm going to be real serious about it, as opposed to the non-serious way I talk about everything else. But
Yeah.
I imagine, and of course, I'm no prophet, and I don't have any insight that other Christians don't. But in my mind, when I cast my mind forward to the so-called Judgment Day, I imagine there'd just be a little room, and there'll be two chairs in that room, one for the Savior and one for each one of us as we go in individually. And I can't imagine the conversation that will occur when our Savior asks a mother and a father, about how they handled the education of their children, and have that mother or father say, "Oh, well, for 13 years, we just handed them off to strangers, and and we allowed them to spend 8, 9 hours a day, 5 days a week for 13 years with people who did not share their values, and in fact, who would talk about subjects and say things that I didn't want my children to hear. And then the Savior will interrupt and be like, what do you mean you didn't want them to hear those things and learn those things and associate with those people? Yeah, I didn't want them to be that. But you just said you dropped them off there every morning for 13
Hmm.
years. And I can't imagine the silence and the terror that a parent would feel. But Mike, it doesn't have to be that way. There are people willing to, live a subsistence lifestyle in the name of laying wealth and fame on the altar of liberty. And, as parents, y'all have a sacred obligation to care for the upbringing of your children, and dropping them off in indoctrination camps where strangers teach them about sexual intercourse at 8 years old. I don't know how you're going to justify that to the Lord. I mean, if you can, good on you, but I don't know how you're going to do it. And the thing is, I think it's going to be one of these the patriots who end up restoring, the Sons of Liberty 2.0. Those kids, no one's going to wonder who they are. They're going to be Rachel's kids. They're going to be the kids of of your sons. They're going to be these kids that we could all pick them out right now,
Yeah.
right? We could all pick out the parents of the Sons of Liberty 2.0. We could all do that right now. And it's going to be one of those things where, sure, liberty is the tide that lifts all boats. And so you're going to have these, you know, second generation Samuel Adams and John Hancocks and George Washingtons and, Patrick Henrys and Thomas Jeffersons and James Madisons. You're going to have the second generation of them. And the people who really never did anything are going to benefit from the courage of those people. And what identifies you? What identifies you as a future founding father? Well, what are you spending your time studying? Do you drink downstream? Are you just listening to people that are themselves ignorant? I mean, I was a teacher, and I'm not going to name names, but in a brick and mortar school that I taught in high school, do you know how many teachers I saw that would admit to just studying the subject a day before they taught it? And it's like,
Right.
oh, I'm not a Latin teacher. I studied math in college, but the only job available was teaching Latin, so I have to study Latin to stay 1 week ahead of the kids. And we can't have that, Mike. We can't have that. If we're going to have a restoration, and we will have a restoration of liberty. Problem is, it's like my dad. My dad was 25 years in the Army, and one of his favorite sayings was "lead, follow, or get out of the way."
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to have. We're going to have a lot of people that are going to have to get out of the way.
Well, yeah, well, and I think that's also part of the good news is, and I love, actually, I've heard Michael Malice make this point a few times. It's like, it doesn't take the whole population. It doesn't take a third of the population. It takes a few rabble rousers who are willing to point out that the emperor is naked and just do it
Well,
again and again.
and it's just going to take a people who have been trained by their parents to not be afraid of the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. You're going to have to stand there on the wall and suffer the slings and arrows tossed at you by not only by the tyrants inside the wall, but the people outside the wall who benefit from the tyranny.
Yeah.
And we will lose some people. Oh man, read that if you want to see who we were and how we are not our father's children. Read that book from the late 1800s that chronicled the lives of the signers of the Declaration. There are stories in there that are just terrifying of how these men and their families suffered for
We
pledging their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor.
Right. That those weren't hollow words when they did that.
Well, no, that's another thing. We we are, God spoke the universe into existence using words. And today, nobody really thinks about what they say. It's, I think you and I have mentioned this before. My first Wolverton ancestor that came to America was a Quaker, and we still have his Bible. Well, I say we, our family. I don't have it, but a member of my family still has it. And in the front, he has written, never speak unless that which you say is more profound than the silence it replaces. And today, it's nothing but, words and the multiplication of words and, just these words constantly, but sound and fury signifying nothing. You realize you and I, in the time, how many minutes we spent today, we have said more of value, and I speak that objectively. I don't mean just because I think we're both clever, even though we are crazy clever, and undeniably interesting. But if you
Clearly.
if you just separate that, there's been more of value said here than has probably been posted on the Fox News channel in a month,
Oh yeah.
or CNN, or any, I don't want to pick on anyone, just any of them. But the point is, why so many words? And I think that's the point. The point that the tyrants love using sound to just, to increase the signal to noise ratio. It's like, how can you get the signal through the noise?
Right.
And if we can, and this is something I'm writing a book about, if we can copy, the pattern and the policies and the practices of the committees of correspondence of the time of the War for Independence, we can do this again. We just have to realize, what do we say? To whom do we say it? Does it matter if Facebook, deletes your account? No, it doesn't.
No, it's and it's funny how that that becomes a badge of honor to so many.
Right.
But
Exactly. Yeah.
But you're right. It's about there was a book. Oh man, I can't remember the author's name now. It's called How to Read a Book.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing I love about the book, and the thing it made me realize, is when you read a book, you need to read it in such a way that you understand what the author is trying to say. And that seems obvious, but it's not, because in order to understand what the author is trying to say, you have to get into the author's head. In order to get into the author's head, you have to have read the things that the author has read in order to understand that a good writer, that is, to understand what a good writer is writing. And it's the same thing. If we want to get in the head, if we want to understand what the author of Liberty has said, we've got to understand what the authors of Liberty read. And that I think is such an important aspect that is missing. That's where your phenomenal book, Founder's Recipe, I think is probably the best resource in a primer of what the if you want to know what liberty, what the words of liberty mean, you got to know what was said before. You know what I mean?
No, and I do agree with that about the book, and it has nothing to do with me. And I mean,
Well,
I'm the author of about 20 pages. The rest,
what
I'm just a compiler.
you're in the immortal great words of, of Ronald Reagan, they call me the great communicator because I communicated great things.
Well, and that's
and that,
true. And
and
the
that's
no, go ahead.
I was just saying that, and that's the power of the book, is that you are communicating the great things that have been said before.
Yeah, and it's just so funny, Mike, that nobody really cares, brother. It's the thing. You've got a certain group of people that do care, but for the most part, it's what you said about the book. I wanted to read. Speaking of Founder's Recipe, I have
Yeah,
quotation from Francis Bacon in that book. And he says, "Read not to contradict and confute, nor to believe and take for granted, nor to find talk and discourage, but to weigh and consider." In other words, don't just read books that you agree with, or books that you want to find something wrong with, or books that you'll have little gobbets that you can throw out and sound intelligent, but read books that will really help you weigh and consider what the truth is. What do you believe, and why? And if you can do that, then you will be a person who is able to not only identify himself as a leader, but to have others say, well, that's an obvious leader because this guy's able to explain so much in such an easy way. And I think the only way to do that is, it's the Richard Price thing, right? Richard, oh my gosh, dude. It's like, I say this about all these guys, but Richard Price, a Welsh preacher that our founding fathers, they offered him citizenship and a home because they called him the torchbearer of liberty. This guy was in fuego, and he had this quotation. He says, "Our first concern, if we love our country, must be to enlighten it. Why are the nations of the world so patient under despotism? Why do they crouch to tyrants and submit to be treated as if they were a herd of cattle? Is it not because they are kept in darkness and lack knowledge? Enlighten them, and you will elevate them. Show them they are men, and they will act like men. Give them just ideas of civil government, and let them know that it is an expedient for gaining protection against injury and defending their rights, and it will become impossible for them to submit to governments which, like most of those now in the world, usurp the rights of men and are little better than contrivances for enabling the few to oppress the many." Now, dude, that was written in 1789.
That's powerful stuff, man.
Just that phrase, enlighten them and you will elevate them. Show them they are men and they will act like men.
Yeah.
You know,
Here's let me play a little bit of devil's advocate to that. And it's not really devil's advocate, but I think it's human nature. And that is, man, you ask why people don't seem to care. And I think it's because, well, I don't know why, but I do know that for many people, man, if they were to open their eyes, it's kind of like what you said before about sitting with the Savior on that judgment day. If they at any time were to open their eyes and to see the actual tyranny that they've been not just supporting but voting for and hoping for, and like if those scales came down for their eyes for just a moment, I think it would be more than a shock to many people. So they don't want to know. They're walking eyes wide shut, man. They're like there's no way that they're going. They're going to follow that Fox News report down to the bitter end, no matter what the evidence says.
That's fine, but may posterity forget that you are our countrymen. May your chains hang low. I don't care, Mike. I really don't. It's one of those things. It's like people ask if I get discouraged. I get discouraged in the sense that I wish more people care, but I don't get discouraged that there aren't more of us because that's fine. It's like Henry V, right? When he gives that now I forgot the name. What's the battle?
The St. Crispin's speech?
Yeah, the St. Crispin's Day speech. What was the name of the battle? The
was it Avignon?
why did I Avignon? No, maybe no. I don't know, but it's St. Crispin's Day speech, Henry V, Shakespeare, where he says, "No, I don't wish for another person here because the fewer of us there are, the greater the share of glory." So,
Right.
fine, don't care. Don't care. Send your kids to the indoctrination camps. Pretend that you deprogram them when you know damn well you don't. You don't do it. They come home, they go to their room, they look at Netflix or Disney Plus or YouTube or Instagram or TikTok. You do the same bloody thing, or you watch some show that you've been binge watching, and and you put that on rinse and repeat for the next 13 years, and then you wonder why, the destruction of the family. And then I'll hear people say, it's the LGBTQ community that's led to the destruction of family. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No, it's the fact that those of us who claim to value the traditional family, with our lips we draw nigh unto it, but our hearts are far from it. They haven't destroyed it. The LGBTQ community hadn't destroyed the family. These Christian families have destroyed the family. We have no fault divorce. We have take your kids to strangers for education. We have come home. We don't have dinner together anymore. We have popular culture that denigrates fathers. We have popular culture that makes it seem like it's okay to be serial monogamists. And so that's what's destroyed the family. And we could stop it all. But the point is, you don't want to. I don't care. The fewer of us there are, the greater the share of glory. And that's fine with me. Because again, lead, follower, get out of the way. And I'm happy to have a follower. We've all been followers at times. People say that to me. They're like, "Oh my gosh, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have known all this stuff." I'm like, dude, I appreciate that. I do. But I also know that I used to be the guy that would cry at the Pledge of Allegiance and be like, "Yeah, one nation, indivisible," and you know, you know, kill them all and let God sort them out. Rah rah USA. And then, I had to come to that education. It was difficult. It was painful. It still is. It still is, in the sense it still is, that you have people that, you know, I guess, that are conservatives that are disappointed that I say certain things, but it is what it is. But at the end of the day, all that's going to matter is what side did you fight on, man? And how are you going to justify, I fought on the side of even abating, even compromising with tyrants?
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you who was the ultimate nonconformist, and his name was Jesus.
Amen. You,
So you
you,
try sitting down across the table from Jesus of Nazareth and explain how, well, the Romans were good and they treated us kindly, and they had some bad policies, but we voted harder, Jesus. And that's the thing, Mike, being so close to election day. And that's one of the things I told that student of mine. I told her that one of my controversial opinions was not to vote. And I'm like, no one has ever voted themselves into freedom. Ever, never, ever in the history of mankind has anyone voted himself out of tyranny and into freedom. It didn't work that way in 1776. It won't work that way in 2022. So you're going to have to decide, do you want to vote your way into maybe a little bit lighter chains? Or do you want to do what it takes to break the chains, pull the plantation house down, and string up the slave owners?
man. that that's the thing, and by the way, and you're right, it's a done deal, and here's why. For those believing Christians out there that are listening, like, it is a done deal. our freedom, our liberty has already been bought with a price, right? And frankly, it wasn't the price of patriots. They paid a bit of the price, so I don't want to like poo poo them, but the price that was paid for your liberty was paid on Calvary. And
Ooh, now come on, now preach. I'm gonna start patting my foot now. Mike's getting
no,
the Holy Ghost over there.
no, it's true. And so and it's funny when we pray for Christ to come again as King, like I don't think we've read what that means. And one of my very favorite let me put it this way, the thing I pray for every day is that come quickly, Jesus, come quickly, and
Mhm.
down all authority, not some of it, put down all authority so that we can have peace on earth.
Well,
Because that's the deal.
you name me a slave that ever voted himself into liberty. Na- it didn't
Zero.
happen. None of them.
Zero.
None of them. And yeah, there are going to be some Ciceros, man, because there are going to be some Mark Antonys that are really, really upset at the things you call them out on. And yeah, you might end up with your hands cut off and your tongue cut out. But so persecuted they the prophets that came before you. And as you just said, Mike, guess what? The ultimate zealot, the ultimate liberty lover, the ultimate patriot hung on a cross, man.
That's right.
So we've all got to decide what is our limit. And right now it's embarrassing. It's like quoting that Richard Price. Richard Price, one of my favorite things he says is knowledge without virtue just makes devils, right? Because
Oh man.
James in the Bible, right? The devils know and tremble that, they know that Jesus is the Christ and they tremble to know that. But so what? They're still devils.
Right.
And, Richard Price says, and he, mimicking Sidney, says, if you are a virtuous people because you simply have to say honestly, am I ruled by a tyrant? If the answer to that is yes, then you are not a virtuous people. Period. So, and Sydney,
That's deep, man.
it is deep, but Sydney doubles down and says there's another easy way to know. Look at all the organizations, he says, in your country that are devoted to the propagation of perversion or evil in any sort of way. Simple, simple. It's math.
And the question for us is, can you find, Lord, can you find me 10
Yeah.
organizations that are not propagating evil?
Brother, I'll tell you, there have been so many times in my life when I've been straight up Elijah and been like, hey, Jesus, I'm going to be over here under this tree. I'm done. Even Israel. And I say that even Americans. I can't even convince an American to fight for liberty. So, Savior, I'll be over here under this tree, just doing my thing, just
You
waiting
and
for it
Hugh
all to
Mercer, man. You and Hugh Mercer under the tree.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, and just like the Lord said to him, he said, I forgot what number the Lord said, 3,000 or something, whatever, that haven't bowed the knee to Baal. And there you go, man. We're right back to the beginning of the conversation. I know I have looked into the eyes of what most of the world would call children who have not bowed the knee to Baal and never will. And not only that, but they're going to have, each one of these girls is going to have 5 or 6 little patriots that they're going to raise outside of the control of the tyrant. And when they get old enough, boom, you talking about, what is her name? What's her name? Bonnie, the Total Eclipse of the Heart, where she's talking about
Oh,
living in a powder keg and shooting off sparks.
right.
You wait till Rachel's sons get to be old enough. We'll be living in a powder keg, and those boys will be shooting sparks.
Yep. Because they won't take it. They won't.
Bonnie Tyler, by the way, for those
Tyler,
of you
yeah.
scoring at home.
You got it. Oh man. But yeah, they won't take it, man. They won't.
And people think that I'm just being hopeful. I'm like, man, I'm not being hopeful. I study history.
That's
I
the
study history, man. I don't need I know, like Patrick Henry, the great statesman himself, you know what, do you know what Lord Byron called Patrick Henry?
what did he call him?
He
No.
called him the forest born Demosthenes. Dude, do you know what I would give to be called the forest born Demosthenes?
Okay.
And to be called that by the Lord Byron, she walks in beauty like the night. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, dude. Listen, I'm just a dumb musician. You got to explain that to me.
Oh, so you know who Byron is, right? Lord
Yeah.
Byron.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lord Byron, the poet, the English poet, he writes about Patrick Henry, that Patrick Henry is the forest born, meaning born in the forest, Demosthenes. Demosthenes was the great Athenian orator and statesman who
Oh, okay.
stood up against Philip the Great and
Man,
Alexander.
why are we not memorizing Patrick Henry speeches?
Brother, look, this is and another thing. Well, but
I'm just
anyway,
gonna throw out everything wrong right now. Just like, why
Patrick,
are we doing
Patrick,
this?
Patrick. Oh, you're not going to read Patrick. Look, why are we not going to read Samuel Adams' Harvard dissertation? Dude, there's more fire. Why aren't we? It's like this book. This I'm compiling another book because I don't actually. I feel like I'm a tour guide. I don't. I'm not an architect. I just show the work of architect. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, this is something awesome that some other guy did. Let me take credit for pointing you to it. But this, I'm
Dude,
putting together this book called Letters of Liberty, and it's all these letters that the founding fathers read. Cato's letters among them, but others too that we've just the Junius. Dude, read the Junius letters. Oh my gosh! And you read this, and I would send you a copy of my like picture of my page. They're just covered in red because this guy just owned it. And so why don't we read it? Because someone might actually believe that stuff.
right.
They're going to be someone sitting there and going, "Hey, why do all these people say the same thing? Why why do all these people why do our founding fathers read letters and books written by people who say tyrants are enemies of humankind and should be dispatched immediately?
You know,
Why do they all say that, and how come we think that we should just vote the bums out? Because heaven knows that's been successful.
yeah, I really, it's funny. I've had this thought for a while about, all, what history calls the great men. And I just think, man, all of those great men are like murderers and thieves. Like, it's
No, yeah. Oh no, you're absolutely right. No, it's totally true. It's like I tell people, I'm like, I'll go into someone's house or in a class or somewhere where I give a speech, and I'm like, y'all like to hang up pictures of these tax evading, whiskey drinking, cop hating tyrant murderers. Right? George Washington's my hero. No, he's not. You couldn't hold his jockstrap, and you wouldn't stay in the same room once he started talking about how he got down. When he's like, of the things, because this is a guy who'd be like, well, that famous quotation by Jefferson about, I think we should just sink the whole island of Great Britain into the bottom of the sea. Yeah, just sink them all. But what about the innocents? They're not so innocent. They're English.
right.
You know what I mean? It's
They're
like,
complicit. They're
yeah,
complicit, man.
you have a tacit agreement of tyranny. Look, I don't care, man. I don't care. If you don't give me the thing about, well, it's the lesser of two evils. It's still evil, Dumkov.
Right.
It's still evil. Don't sit here and say, well, I voted for the lesser of two evils. You realize that means you're voting for evil. Why don't you do what those people in the paintings that you hang in your house, why don't you do what they do? You know why? Because you don't love liberty. You're comfortable on the plantation.
How
Hey,
comfortable are we? How comfortable
hey,
are we? Come
hey,
on,
hey,
tell
you
me.
got you got a job. You've got food, right?
Yeah.
You got your Wi-Fi going. Yeah, come on, come on. What liberty meant? Some of us are
We
gonna
got
look.
bread and games, brother. Bread and
Yeah,
games.
yeah, hey, and that's of course. There you go. There's another one. Everybody can quote bread and circuses, man. Okay, where'd that come from, smart guy? I don't know. Why don't you read Juvenile Satire number 10? Just read it. Sit down, Google it instead of Googling, you know, ridiculous things. Google Juvenile Satire number 10 and read the whole thing, and then grab a pitchfork, maybe a rifle, and let's do this the right way.
Now, let me ask you this, because you've had a
Yeah.
couple of articles. Your last couple of articles have actually dealt with guns in general.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'd love to chat with you. And I just love, again, and you're doing this whole episode. So it's one of the things I love about you, Joey, is that you're able to take these ideas and explain them in a way, not explain them in a way that we understand them today, but point out the similarities of how history is repeating itself. So first of all, the one about abolishing the Second Amendment in New Jersey, you guys, I'm gonna put these articles in the show description. You've got to read it, but reading about King George the Third and some of the just I have to read this one quote because it just makes me laugh because of
Okay. Is it something I wrote or something King
no,
George wrote?
it's something that he said.
Oh, okay.
Oh, where the heck is it? It made me laugh because it was it's so pompous and full of himself. And I get it. He's a king, but this is a thing that, again, it's one of those things that just ticks me off is placing one man above another. Um, when he's talking about, yeah, he's talking. This quote is so. If this doesn't sum up royalty right here, when the unhappy and deluded multitude against whom this force will be directed shall become sensible of their error, I shall be ready to receive the misled with tenderness and mercy.
Yes, I'll be ever so kind to my disloyal subjects.
Yes. It's, oh, why, thank you, great father.
Yeah, oh, totally. But
Oh,
can't you just put that in what are we, the 21st century? Yeah, put that in 21st century language. And Joe Biden has said those things.
absolutely.
Why in God's name should an ordinary citizen be able to purchase an assault weapon? Um, for the same reason that ordinary citizens had, quote, assault weapons on Lexington Green?
Right.
For the fact that my servant doesn't get to tell me what weapons I can and can't own?
That's right.
Pretty much that there, King Joe.
Yeah. Who
But
needs it?
again, but again, what's he gonna do? He gonna enforce this? No. It's gonna be just like in the Third Reich, brother.
That's right.
Hitler didn't burn a Jew. Hitler didn't lock up a single Jew in a concentration camp. You had lower level bureaucrats carrying out all his nonsense, his
That's right.
evil. So don't tell me that. And I wrote an article about this several years ago about don't give me the red flag nonsense that the federal government. Yeah, the federal government passes these things, but guess what? It's local police that enforce them.
That's right. That's right.
So please go out to your truck right now. I'm talking to you, not you, Mike, but you, whoever's listening. Go out to your truck, get that stupid I back the blue sticker off your car, or leave the I back the blue sticker, but please take the don't tread on me sticker off. You can't have both of them, man. Or else you can, if you want, take them both off and get a new one. Maybe I should start an Etsy store and sell one that says Red Coat Lives Matter.
Well, right, right. Because here's the thing. Here is the thing when it comes to the police, and I think it's something that everybody needs to understand. And I'm going to try to make this just as clear and simple as possible. The police are not there to protect you. They're there to protect the state. That's the
Right.
end.
Well,
It's the state that's paying their bills. It's the state that's paying their that's
oh, no. Wait a minute, Mike. I'm gonna disagree with you. It's not the state pay you. You and I are paying their bills because we are forced to fund the police for fear of incarceration if we don't.
right.
The
And by the
state doesn't have a job other than being a mafia.
now let me now I'm not going to try to be too cute here because I'm going to disagree with you a little bit
Okay.
because all the state needs to do is just print the money. The only reason why we pay taxes is for that jail to be jailed.
Oh,
Because
no.
that's all the state needs to do.
Oh, absolutely. If they can print 12 trillion, they can print 50 trillion. It doesn't
Of course.
matter.
And-
But just think about how perverse that is, man.
Yes.
It's just Animal House. Thank you, sir. May I have another?
Right. Right.
You don't need my money except as a way to humiliate me and remind me of who's in charge. And that's why you need the 13 years of government indoctrination camps to remind you that without government, there'd be no such thing as roads or peace. Because everybody knows that the government does nothing but maintain peace throughout the world.
That's right. Yeah. I it's one of those things. Yeah.
Well, read the
Amen,
law about it.
brother.
I always say to people, they're like, "What do we do about roads?" I guess we wouldn't have any, man. If your only way of getting something is if the government steals your money and does it, then I guess we won't have any roads. But of course, think about that with things even more substantial, more critical to life. What would you? How are you going to get it? What if we didn't have grocery stores? Think about this. If we didn't have government, we wouldn't have grocery stores. How am I going to eat? I don't know, man. Plant a seed, you Igmo. Come on, man.
Right.
Plant
Right.
a seed, kill a cow, do your thing, man. Learn a skill, do something. But if we didn't have roads because the government didn't build them, then we obviously don't need roads.
Yeah. But here's the thing.
Does the government brush your teeth?
Right. But here's the thing. We do need roads, and they would be built. Like
Exactly.
That is
Exactly.
that is the thing that would be figured out. I mean, there were roads before there was government making roads. That's for sure.
There was literally everything better before government got involved. And lest we have this notion that government is some other, government is collective us, man.
Oh,
So
dude.
all we have to do to stop government is just say, okay, government's over. No, I'm not. Nope. Then come get it. If you want this one, come get. Print all that money. We're not using it. Print it all you want. Not going to use it because the Constitution, literally in black letters, says only gold and silver for the payment of legal tender, payment of debts, public and private. Literally says that. So, but what happens if we all just do it, dude? What happens if 2% of Americans refuse to obey any tyrannical order issued from any level of government? What if 2%? They would change overnight.
And you know what? That may or may not be true. Like, I believe you. Like, I'm not just saying that. What I'm saying is, what would change overnight are the lives of those people, the lives of those 2%, no matter what. Whatever happens outside.
That's not to say we'd be successful.
Right. Well, but we'd be successful within. Well, I'm gonna take back what I was about to say. See, that's a preemptive take back there.
Well, yeah, preemptive. You sent in a predator drone to to do a double tap on your comment you were going to make.
Well, because I was going to say, that those 2% could live in peace, but unfortunately, we know that's not true. We only have to talk about Ruby Ridge. We only have to talk about, the Bundys in Nevada. We only have to talk about like case after case after case where the government just can't leave it alone and they'll just murder people. Flat out murder.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, that will happen. I hope and pray that happens. Right? Because that blood is going to be the sacred offering placed on the altar of liberty. Why should it not be for us the way it was for our fathers? Why they couldn't vote themselves into liberty? We're not going to be able. We've become convinced that we can, but we can't, and they couldn't, and they knew that. And after a while of the First Continental Congress, the Olive Leaf written by John Dickinson, the Second Continental Congress, and George III doesn't even read it. Finally, they're like, all right, let's light this candle, y'all. How long will we suffer the long train of abuses and usurpations? But we don't care. And this is the thing. It's okay that we don't care. It's okay that so many of us don't care, because there's going to be those few who do. They're going to do the hard work for the rest of us. And we're going to put their faces in paintings, and in the next century we'll have the faces of, we'll have their faces in paintings and busts, marble busts, and they'll be around, and we'll all benefit from the work of a few men, the way it has always been and the way it will always be. The fact is that there are billions, uncounted billions of people who all benefit from the courage of one man, that man being Jesus of Nazareth.
You are listening to And If Love Remains.
The first of 23 installments requested by Dr. Levitt. We're trying to be in compliance here because we're taking him and that whole organization down.